pick and roll with it. Make a pick and roll with it. Betting weekly. Fast break. From coast to coast and way downtown. From coast to coast and way downtown. From coast to coast and way downtown.
Welcome into the latest edition of Betting Weekly Fast Break. I am Doug Kazarian alongside professional handicapper and bettor Wes Reynolds. And we had a pivotal Game 4 last night that was tied late fourth quarter. Timberwolves were unable to get over the hump and tie the series. Instead, it's 3-1. Will the Knicks be able to get over the hump and tie things, this one on the road as opposed to Minnesota last night? So a lot of moving parts. We'll also get in the WNBA, a stacked card with 5 games, including a few late games that'll certainly be some interesting because they'll tip off pretty late and kind of near the end of the Knicks Pacers games. But we'll get into all that. Wes, our resident Indiana native, are you ready for everything tonight?
I am ready. Hopefully, I'm more ready than the crowd was. I think, and it wasn't like all 18,000+ were at the Indy 500, but the crowd on Sunday felt a little bit subdued. Felt like they were a little bit tired because it was Indy 500 weekend and because it was a holiday weekend with all the barbecues and probably family events going on over Memorial Day weekend. And they felt like they weren't juiced up and into it. I think you're going to see it more juiced up tonight.
All right, they need that crowd because the Knicks were the ones that played desperate. Tom Thibodeau, you can, in fact, teach an old dog new tricks. He played more guys off the bench, and that sort of energy in Karl Anthony Towns dropping 20 in the fourth proved to be the difference. So the Knicks saved their season and at least force a pivotal Game 4. They really needed to win both Games 3 and 4. So they did Game 3. We'll see what happens tonight. We'll get into that game. Just a reminder to tear into the action with BetRivers prop packs. Place the same game parlay of at least $10 on any NBA game to receive a prop pack, which can win you boosts and bonus credits. If the target score on your prop pack card hits during the game, you win the prize indicated on the card. Head to the BetRivers app now to tear into the action. Wes, last time you were on the show was Friday. You went 4-1 on both Friday and Saturday combined in the NBA and WNBA. You saw the ball really well yesterday on Betting Weekly Hardball. So let's stay hot, my friend. Pacers, slight home favorite. This number has come down from 2.5 to 2 today with the news of Aaron Nesmith's uncertainty. At least that's what the reaction was from an odds maker when I was talking to him. He felt sharp money came in when that Nesmith news was there. Over under 220.5. So I initially looked at this, and that's why I was putting some feelers out there, just really sort of confused why this line was 2 and not 3.5, 4. But we'll get into that momentarily. I want to know, obviously, a painful loss for Indy fans. Pacers had the game by double digits, big lead. They blow it. How do you think Indy responds given how that Game 3 went down?
Late in the first half, and then they got a little sloppy. The Knicks made a run, and it was 13 at the half, and even though everybody felt like, okay, the game is in hand, this game is over, it wasn't. And I think that the Pacers, just they got to move the ball, and they got to try to speed it up. And the Knicks, I thought, were successful in slowing the game down, and I'll get to that in a moment with the change in the starting lineup. But the Pacers just, they got sometimes when they get big leads. And we've seen that a little bit during the regular season, I should say. They can get a little bit stagnant. They can start to settle for jumpers instead of doing what they do best, which is to get in transition. And then when you're in the half court to actually move the ball and to share the ball, everybody gets a touch. And then that leads to open shots. When you get the defense scrambling, the Pacers, I think, are better when the game is chaotic. And not when it's, kind of bogged down half court, which it became later in the second half. So, I would expect that the Pacers should have a lot more juice tonight. They're still up 2-1. The series is not over. It's just now that there's a little bit more of a sense of urgency now where it's like, okay, they punch back. Now we got to respond.
I agree. I think that's what I'm expecting from them. First of all, they have an elite coach, not a good coach, an elite coach. And I think he knows how to massage maybe any sort of disappointment or kind of opportunity lost. Or it's that old golf adage, don't let one bad shot make it two bad shots, right? You carry it over to the next shot. I think this team is resilient enough. They're seasoned enough in these playoffs and even last to sort of, on to the next play, right? And I think they'll be fine in that regard. What about the Knicks? Because they had that hangover effect from game one, blowing it, and they really were trailing wire to wire in game two. They sort of the first dam broke, right? Like they finally got over the hump. Big comeback for them, game one. What are you expecting from New York in terms of the confidence, maybe swagger? And obviously, they had an adjusted starting lineup in game three.
Yeah, and I don't feel like there's going to be much of a change. I think you're probably going to see the same starting lineup tonight with Mitchell Robinson going, and his props, by the way, got inflated because he was a starter. So if you got some unders if you played that in game three. So you're going to see Robinson over Hart. I still think Hart is going to play those minutes. I think a lot of things are going to be the same. Maybe Tom Thibodeau realizes I can go a little bit deeper into the bench, but that doesn't mean you're going to see like DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet play like a ton of minutes. It's going to be very much situational. It's going to be dependent a lot on foul trouble here. So Tom Thibodeau, I think, is a creature of habit. He is not a guy that I think is going to overreact or even react properly to a one-game sample size. He's going to go with what he's been with. He's going to go with that, by and large, that same starting lineup, even though it's not the exact same lineup. But he's going to play Hart his max minutes, and he's not going to go, you think, too deep into the bench, at least in terms from a substantial minute standpoint. So I think that they're probably going to do the same thing. You're going to see a lot more of the double big scenario with Robinson and Towns. And I think he realizes I want to slow this game down a little bit, maybe not to quite a crawl, but he doesn't want to run with the Pacers because I think the Knicks are going to get beat if they run with the Pacers. And I think that they realize that.
I agree. I think they want to make it half court, but it's funny. The Pacers want to make the Knicks half court too because they're pressing full court, right?
Yes.
They're picking up 85 feet, 90 feet, which I think is a smart move. Carlisle knows that you can wear these guys down, especially later in the series. I think that's when the Knicks' lack of depth is most pronounced because they're going every other night. Now, there's no travel between games 3 and 4, so they've stayed in Indianapolis, but nonetheless, every other night. You heard Aaron Gordon after game 7 loss for Denver talk about how, maybe if there was more breaks, they'd be fresher. So I wonder if it's going to be a little bit of a slog fest. So like I said a moment ago, Wes, this line felt cheap. I'm a little uneasy because it feels too cheap. To me, the Pacers are the better team. They're fresher. They have points come more easily for them than the Knicks. But Brunson could have another big game after having a down game last game. Towns may have broken through. He's literally single-handedly won 2 playoff games for the Knicks in this postseason. One of the others was against Detroit. Maybe these role players step up. So cautiously, I like the Pacers. I'm not pulling the trigger yet. How are you analyzing this game?
Same way, and the same thing where you pay the small favorite on the money line like I did with Oklahoma City last night. So Pacers, I think they were minus 129, maybe have ticked up a cent or two at BetRivers, but that's the way I would play it, and I will likely play the side is the Pacers on the money line because Game 3 was the first time you really saw them get a big lead in the series. And then, much like the regular season, like I was mentioning earlier, get a little bit stagnant, start settling for threes, start settling for jumpers, get a little bit lax on defense. And that was part and parcel in the fourth quarter of just not doubling Karl Anthony Towns, which I think you had to do when you got Brunson sitting on the bench and you have Towns and a bunch of guys that are not consistent scorers like Hart, like Landry Shamet, Deuce McBride. You got to double that guy. You can't let that guy beat you. You'll let the reserves and the bench guys beat you. Pacers are better when it's a more chaotic game. So that's what and that's what happened in game 1. Even though they got down 16, Game 1 was a more like boom, 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 where it just happened so quickly in the final 3 minutes when Nesmith hit a bunch of those threes. Right. Knicks commit a couple turnovers. Knicks miss a couple free throws, and that's what happened. Whereas Game 3, when the Knicks made that comeback, it felt like a slow burn. And Reggie Miller, who has his detractors certainly on commentary, I thought was right when he said, that this is a little bit uneasy here. They're kind of letting these guys hang around a little bit. And then all of a sudden it was kind of like death by paper cuts, I think, for the Knicks, where Towns got going and all of a sudden that lead dissipates and then they eventually take the lead. And, Tibbs had to do a good job, I think, of managing the foul trouble with the two stars. And, slowly but surely the Knicks were able to take the game. So it wasn't as quick of a thing as like the Pacers in game one.
Yeah, I do think the Pacers are the right side. This line just stinks. It's fishy. Like, I know what the power ratings were from the regular season. I just don't believe it because of what the Pacers have done this calendar year. I just think the number's a little off. I think Indy's better coached slightly, though. I really respect Thibodeau as well. But just throwing it out there. Hey, just a reminder, we are all part of the Betting Weekly umbrella. Don't forget about Betting Weekly Game Bet Match with Nigel Seeley and Sean Calvert. They're previewing the men's second round of the French Open. And then Betting Weekly Dojo. Nigel and Neil Channing also dropped this morning on the BetRivers Network. Go check it out, discussing the betting advantages of being at the event. Of course, the French Open is underway out there at Roland Garros. Wes, what about the total? I know the Knicks played their starting lineup, changed it more defensive-minded, maybe more rim protection with Mitchell Robinson. In only game one went over. Game two snuck under by a hook or 1.5, depending on your number. And then game three way under. This number's come down from the market a little bit, 220.5. Any feel? I mean, you mentioned Knicks wanting to make it a half-court game. Pacers want to run. So I think the odds, the market's a little in between here. How do you feel about the total?
Yeah, it's a pass for me. Would lean a little bit under because I think that you're now seeing the Knicks are going to be able at some point to slow it down like they did in game three. Even if the Pacers make it more chaotic, it's still a lot of possessions to catch up to what we saw in game one and game two in Madison Square Garden. Keep in mind, though, this total, by the way, was 227 and a half just 2 games ago before it got hit to the under. And then, like you said, it cleared or went under by a hook. And that's a big adjustment. So, I'm a little bit gun shy and a little bit leery of, going ahead and following that big of a move, even though I think it's relatively justified. Lean under, but at this point, I think the market's really caught up.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a good observation seeing what game one was. And even game one was way down compared to the regular season meetings. And the market's just adjusting the playoffs. Part of that is the officials swallowing the whistle a little bit, letting them play on. That's just the nature of the beast. The market knows that. Odds makers, the line originators know that. And that's why we see even game one much lower than the regular season meetings. Just a reminder to get involved in the conversation in the comments section here on YouTube. Steve from Lynn, he's chimed in the past. We always like his input. Hey, guys, tough night for me last night, but got a few parlays before that, tailing the show picks. Thank you. Good luck to you tonight. Really appreciate that. We aim to please. We definitely had a good show last night. Chris Massaro like Caruso over, had some other ones. So we got there. And always a sweat with me and Chet Holmgren's under in the rebounds, but it got there. Even the market adjusting to 7. So we got plus money on that one. Let's talk props. Before I get into your props and my favorite props, I want to ask you about Karl Anthony Towns because I do feel like an idiot. In game one, I had over 1.5 threes. He got there. Why did I go away from it? Because he's had 2 or more in all 3 games so far. The market right now is 1.5 made threes for Towns, and it's in the neighborhood of minus 152, I believe I saw on the previous graphic for BetRivers. And there you go, the second from the bottom there, overs minus 152. He's getting the attempts there, Wes. Why aren't we all just playing this like it's a layup line? Towns over 1.5 made threes.
Well, I think maybe the reason is because of the foul trouble that he often gets to, which he got into in game 3, by the way. I think he, not as much. I think he picked up his 4th foul early in the 4th and eventually got 5, but, stayed in the game, and he really had it rolling. And he was able to score inside and out. I thought Miles Turner had a tough time covering him in the 4th quarter, and, they didn't elect to double him either, but you haven't seen a ton of movement, I think, in the props. 11.5 by and large on the rebounds, 21.5 on the points, The assists I mentioned going under, and he didn't have an assist, by the way, in game number 3. So that's still at 1.5, pretty much in the market. But I think it's priced right, Doug. I think all the Towns, I think a lot of people want to play that and play some of Towns' props based on the fact that he was so huge and basically won them game 3, essentially. But he's somebody I'm staying away from a prop standpoint. I think he's right around the number. I will be curious to see, and you mentioned it earlier, if Rick Carlisle, how great he's been in terms of the adjustments, what they do, because I think they're more worried about Towns beating them than they are Brunson beating them. Because if you look, and this is not to disparage Jalen Brunson, who's a terrific player and a star player in this league, but there are times, and you noticed it, I think, in the fourth quarter on Sunday, where the offense flows a little bit better without him when you run it through Cat. And maybe not so much with Jalen Brunson trying to create everything off the dribble. We know he can go for 40 on any random night, but sometimes it gets a little stagnant too with Jalen Brunson on the offense, but I'll get to him momentarily with one of these props.
And I think you raised a really interesting point, because I was leaning over, and just to help people sort of process over 1.5 threes minus 152, what 152 translates to is 60%. Let's call it 61. So basically, if you think there's better than a 61% chance then Towns will make at least 2 threes, then you should bet the over, and the juice isn't, there's still an edge. I think it's there because of what you said earlier, Wes, and that's when he's out there with the sort of newer bench players playing, the guys that aren't typically out there like Shamet and some of those guys, then they got to send a double. So if they're sending a double, then they got to get the ball out of Towns' hand. Therefore, it's less likely he makes 3. So you're giving me a little pause. Now, if it was 130, I'd be playing it. I still think we're going to kick ourselves, considering he had 7 attempts from behind the arc and he's a good shooter, and 1.5 feels like we should be playing it. But yeah, it's a pass. It's not a bet on the under. It's a pass. Now, you mentioned the assist. He's gone under in this series, under 1.5 assists. The last 2 games, he had 2 in game 1. And then the previous series, he didn't get to 2 at all. So he's gone under 1.5 assists, I believe, in like 14 of 16 games or something like that, except for the first game of the playoffs. It's minus 120 right now at BetRivers, under 1.5 assists for Towns. I'm playing it. It's an official bet for me. You got me onto this. I like it. Do you think it's a play?
For the assists, it's probably priced correctly. You've got this all over the place too. You've got some juice to the over, some juice to the under. So this is kind of a high variance one. I think the best I see in the market, Rivers right now minus 120. I think that's probably the sharper lean here. So I would lean under. It has not made my card though just yet.
Okay. And do you think it's because? So my concern is what you were saying, that they're going to try to get the ball out of Towns' hands. Do you think he's going to have to pass the ball and it comes down to maybe a hockey assist, or if it's a pass to a shot, just that shot going in?
That's the concern too, because one of these guys off the bench, I think are bound to make a couple threes tonight. It might be Deuce McBride, so there might be times where he does get double and he has to pass out. So that is a little bit what keeps me off of this in terms of the shooters, because we know off the bench, we're going to say Hart now off the bench because he's not a starter. Hart and McBride are going to get, decent bench minutes, and then you're going to get the spot minute guys like DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet. But it's basically going to be McBride and potentially Hart as the 3-point shooters.
That makes sense. Okay, so those are the couple trends I wanted to cover, just because it was really interesting how it's been like cashing, and should we jump on it, blah blah blah. Now you have some regular plays you want. Fire away on some props that have caught your eye.
Yeah, a couple of these. I'll start one on the Pacers side. Obi Toppin under 8.5 points, minus 127. It's been 7.5 all series, and he has cleared it twice. He's landed on 8. So now you're getting it adjusted to 8.5. However, I wonder if he's going to play maybe a little bit less minutes off the bench. And he is a regular rotation guy off the bench, and certainly was in the regular season. But now the Pacers have to make the adjustment, Doug, where they have to, counteract that Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson double big lineup. Maybe not at the start of the game, But in certain scenarios in the meat of the game, they're going to have those guys on the floor at the same time. So you need a little bit more size. And Obi Toppin doesn't really, he provides athleticism and he provides energy, but he really doesn't provide that, that size. So in terms of on the glass, are there going to be times where you're going to have to go with Turner? And it's been Tony Bradley the last couple games instead of Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant's kind of been replaced in that rotation with Tony Bradley, but you may see the Pacers at time have to go double big if they want to counteract that. And I think that hurts Obi Toppin a little bit. So I'm willing to sell at the apex now that this has gone up to 8.5. And that's one of the things you have to look at with playoff props just in general is the fact that you have these odds makers. Number one, they're monitoring these closer than they did in a regular season when you got Tuesday night, 7 NBA games, Wednesday night, 10 game card during the regular season, where they're probably, number one, taking lower limits on those. And number two, the fact that they're not monitoring as close because it's maybe in the meat of the football season and you're not seeing as much action on those. But now that the NBA playoffs are front and center, you're seeing the most action on NBA pretty much right now at the counter and on the apps and what have you. But one of the things you got to keep in mind is when you have the adjustment of a number. And I'll give a couple examples. One example was Jalen Williams last night. Jalen Williams had been 5.5 assists pretty much all series. He went way under on Saturday because that was a blowout because the Timberwolves won by 40 and he didn't see the bench for the better part of a quarter or the court for a better part of a quarter and a half. And then it went to 4.5 last night. Now it's still juiced the over, but that's where you want to buy on the dip with some of these. So I bought 4.5, had to lay about $1. I think it was $1.40. And he did just clear it. He got 5, but he still cleared it and it won. Same thing with OG Anunoby on his points on Sunday. He had been 16.5 throughout this entire series against the Pacers, and he landed 16 twice. So then it goes down to 15.5. And that's where you buy on the dip, where you play the over. Now, he landed 16. He probably should have had much more, but he cleared it in the middle of the third quarter. He just didn't score in the fourth. But that's kind of my approach for Obi Toppin. Sell a little bit. It always seems like it's a point adjustment upwards, but sell a little bit on Obi Toppin. So I am selling under 8.5, 127. And then another one I did play on the Knicks side. This is another one where you want to buy a little bit too. Jalen Brunson over 2.5 threes at BetRivers. It's plus 105. It's minus money actually at a lot of other shops. The last time this went to plus money was in game number 2 where he hit 5 threes. And every time in the entire playoffs where he has hit just 1 3 and he hit only 1 on Sunday, and a lot of that was because he was in foul trouble. Hell, he didn't even come back into the game until like a minute 30 when the game was kind of decided when the Knicks had a 2-possession lead. But every time he's hit 1 3 in the playoffs, he's rebounded the next game. Game 4 in Detroit, he had hit 1 the game before. He hit 4 threes. Game 6 at Detroit, he hit 3 threes. Game 6 versus Boston in the semifinals, he hit 3. Game 2 against Indiana that I just mentioned, where he hit 1, he hit 5 in that following game. So Jalen Brunson over 2.5 threes. And then Josh Hart, I have not done this yet. I'm trying to figure out how I want to play this because the numbers are going to be pretty tight, but I would lean Josh Hart over the raw, which is the rebounds and assists, or the points, rebounds, and assists. Keep in mind with Josh Hart going to the bench, he still played 34 minutes on Sunday, and he cleared that discount of 21.5 on the points, rebounds, and assists because as a starter, he was like, I think 27.5, 28.5 for the first couple of games, but then he obviously takes a dive. Much like Robinson gets boosted up on the rebounds where he had been 6.5, 7.5. Then all of a sudden he was 9.5 and he went under on Sunday. So this is where I look at Josh Hart. I think he's going over maybe the rebounds, assists, points, rebounds, and assists. I just got to decide how I want to play it, but not an official bet yet for me.
Okay, so Hart, obviously, his minutes changed and his rotation changed going to the bench with Mitchell Robinson starting, but he's still crashing the boards. Had the monster rebound late end of game 3 that the broadcast team pointed out, I believe, was Stan Van Gundy. And so the two props you do like, Toppin under 8.5 with the adjustment in the series and the domino effect, it may affect his playing time. And then Jalen Brunson over 2.5 made threes plus 0.5. So I love the analysis. I haven't had a good feel for these props in this particular series. Much more in the Western Conference Finals, I feel better about things. But I am playing the Towns under assists, and I'll just have to sweat it out. He had one great pass because it was a breakdown on the Indy defense, and it was for a layup or dunk. In the transition, they sort of lost a guy on the baseline. But other than that, he's a guy who's looking for his offense and driving. But to your point, there could be some doubles and things like that. So we'll see how it plays out. I just got to play the under 1.5. It's been such a strong trend. Western Conference, I mentioned it, top of the show. And again, more people getting involved in the conversation on our comments section. A couple guys, Byron, Mural, and Steve from Lynn interacting. That's good. You guys can interact with each other. We're all a friendly community here. So Western Conference Finals, Minnesota made a lot of plays to get back in the game. Down 9 a couple times, hit big threes. For some reason, OKC was leaving guys like Dante DiVincenzo open in the short corner three, but also give the Thunder credit. They responded every time the T-Wolves made a run, including SGA's underneath through the legs pass to Jalen Williams for a three. That really was the dagger and play of the game. So now we have a 3-1 series. The Thunder are the overwhelming favorites to win it all. They are monster favorites in the series price headed home, and they are favored, as you would imagine, in Game 5. Given how the T-Wolves have played the last 2 games, Wes, obviously blowout win in Game 3, I would think valiant effort in Game 4, especially with Randall and Ant doing nothing. How would you play this Game 4 with a sizable lead? As they say, the closeout game's the hardest. Remember, Thunder were like 17-point favorites or something ridiculous against the Grizzlies in that closeout game and won by 2. How do you feel about this Game 5?
Yeah, when I look at the total first, not a big adjustment. What was the close last night, Doug? Like 219.5?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's only 220.5. So my instinct would be to play the under, but I don't feel like I'm getting enough of an adjustment yet. So maybe wait on this if you like the under. Wait on this because you're not getting the adjustment from that 254 that we certainly saw last night.
Why do you like the under? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, I just now I would like it better if this series was tied at 2-2 because then that makes it even more pivotal. Then that would be like an auto play on the under for me. I don't want to say regardless of the number, but the number I would be a lot less number sensitive in that scenario if it was 2-2. But I just wonder, with Minnesota, people think that Ant-Man and Randall probably are going to have bounce back games off game number 4, but even if they do, what happens to the other guys? Because the other guys, I thought Alexander Walker was tremendous last night.
Tremendous.
DiVincenzo was tremendous. McDaniels. So, the 3, 4, and 5 options really stand up. Naz Reid was solid too, especially on the glass. He had 11.6 rebounds. TJ Shannon, who they kind of discovered in Game 3, they finally play him off the bench, and he's instant offense. He's not a guy that Chris Finch is going to play 25, 30 minutes because, of course, he's behind Ant-Man, for God's sakes. But, they get instant offense with them. But I wonder if Edwards and Randall have the bounce back games we anticipate, how does that affect the other guys? So that's probably keeping me a little bit away from the total. I would maybe say Minnesota first half. Once those get out there, those usually don't get put out there too much until game day. But 4, 4.5. I don't think it's widely available. There's a few shops have it up, but I could certainly sponsor that with Minnesota because now you get Oklahoma City. Do they get lax or do they get a little bit overhyped, knowing that, okay, we're one game away from our finals. We're one game away. We've been the best team all year, 68 wins. So do they come out maybe a little bit over anxious against Minnesota? Where so I could see plus 4.5 for Minnesota in the first half. I have not bet anything yet on this game, though.
Real quickly before we switch to the WNBA, Ant, he's upset with how he performed. Very much criticized by the pundits, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
What do you expect for his props? Are you going to take blind takeovers on everything, or how do you think he responds?
I don't know if I'm going to blind takeovers. I was actually on the under last night with 28.5 points. Just thought that got tacked. Now, I did not expect what we saw last night where it's like, he's not even going to come close. You're thinking, okay, it's a small edge. Maybe he lands 24, 25, just depending on the shot volume. But the shot volume was down, and hence the points were down, I think, for Anthony Edwards. So I'm looking at the adjustment, actually, as we speak right now, 27.5. So not a big adjustment. I think that's actually where it closed in game number 4. but juice to the under pretty much everywhere. And actually BetRivers is at 26.5. So they are the market low. So I don't know if I'm going to blindly bet overs, but usually when I have something like that, everybody wants to attack the points, right? I would maybe want to attack the combination, the points, rebounds, and assists rather than the points, because then that gives you a little bit of a buffer, because maybe he gets it going and these guys, these third, fourth, and fifth options, McDaniels, DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, they're still in their bag and they're still shooting very well. So Ant-Man will trust them as a ball distributor. So that's why I would maybe be, if I'm attacking Ant on the over, a little bit more all-inclusive points, rebounds, assists.
His rebounds, assists has been a trendy prop over, because in the first 3 games, he was at 12, 15, and 15. Yesterday, combined 10. So maybe he does bounce back, get up to the teens, so to speak. All right, let's shift gears to the WNBA now. As I mentioned, 5 games in the W. We had the big Caitlin Clark news yesterday. There was a domino effect we touched on with the MVP odds, some of the futures, but the Fever are off today. They play tomorrow. There's an interesting slate tonight. I don't absolutely love any games. Are there any things that sort of catch your eye that are sort of an interesting spread? Obviously, we have a 17.5-point line with the expansion Valkyries, who albeit have 2 wins, visiting the defending champs. Any games that really caught your eye that you were like, I don't know, wishing for hoping for a different number that at least caught your eye from an? I mean, look, we have a battle of winless teams in Connecticut, and the Dallas Wings are 4.5-point road favorites.
The big mover on the card has been with the Dream and the Sparks, and that's an injury move. Dream were, I believe, a 1-point favorite, and then it became 2 and now 2.5, with Brittany Griner is going to miss for the Dream. And you're also getting Rakia Jackson back for the Sparks, who's missed the last 2 games with a concussion. So the Sparks certainly getting the support here at 2 and 3, and they've been a little bit up and down early. They lost on the road to the Valkyries, did come back against with a nice win over the Sky, even though the Sky have been really bad. I'll let you get to them momentarily, but Kelsey Plum, look, she is delivered. Even though they're 2 and 3, she is delivered for the Sparks. She's been a big time scorer, one of the leaders in the league, and she's also been a big time assist player. I was over her assist on Sunday, would lean over that now, even though that is up to 8.5. But that caught my eye just from a movement standpoint, but did not bet that game.
Let's keep it with this game. And you mentioned Griner and things, and the Sparks getting healthier with Rakia Jackson. I like the over here. Dream want to run, and I think they're more likely to run without Griner, and that's going to move Brianna Jones to more of the paint player instead of sort of the twin tower. But I think with this Sparks offense, and they want to move, they have a very sort of analytically driven coach, new coach there. I like the over 161.5. I'm going to make that an official play for me. But like I said, 5 games, that means 5 sides, 5 totals, first halves, nothing really jumping out to me. Anything jumping out to you elsewhere on the card?
Yeah, I think I might be limited to 1 play so far, at least on the WNBA card, and going against an undefeated team is never, I think, a good scenario, especially one that I think is definitely a title contender. But I like the Seattle Storm a little bit in the first half. I think at Rivers it's plus 4 minus 15. Maybe you'll get a 4.5 out there in the market, but look, they've been tremendous, Minnesota, even though they were a little bit clunky last Friday against Connecticut, had to come back in the fourth quarter. And they were, I knew my Collier prop was cooked on that one, just because it's like, well, I thought they were 16, 17-point favorites. She's going to be out at the end of the third quarter, and she had to play damn near the full game. She hardly left the floor because they were behind against Connecticut, but they did pull it out. They're 4-0. That's not a team I'm worried about long-term, but the reason why I lean a little bit Storm here and why I'm going to play that, it is the first game back for Kayla McBride. So you've played at 4 games without her. And coming back from an injury, I don't know how many full minutes she's going to get. Maybe she goes back to what she usually plays, those full starters minutes. But the chemistry, it takes a game or two, I think, for a starter, and especially somebody that's a good shooter and a good scorer like Kayla McBride. It takes a little bit of time in terms of distributing the shots and, Cheryl Reeve working out the rotations and how many minutes she's going to play that first game back. So the Lynx could be a little bit out of rhythm early on in the first half with her back in the lineup. And you get a Seattle team, granted they look bad in the opener where they got blown out by the Mercury, but they've won 3 straight. I think they have a little bit better chemistry without Jewel Lloyd now, with Skylar Diggins being the alpha as the guard running the show. Emeka and Gumike had a huge game against the Aces. They put up over 100 on the Aces and held Aja Wilson to well under 20 points. So I think they've got this chemistry. They've got Gabby Williams now. She was in camp. Remember, Gabby Williams was a late signee because of how well she played for France in the Olympics. So they got her in late. So the Storm were always kind of a little bit off, and they got off to a really slow start in the season before they picked it up. Now they've started well. The Storm, by the way, have the second best net rating behind the New York Liberty, who I think we would all power rate number 1 in the WNBA right now. And only 2 weeks into the season, that's meaningless, but still, they look very much like the best team and as the defending champions. But the Storm, I think, have been sneaky impressive early. So Storm first half for me.
Okay, I can see that. +4, -118 at BetRivers. Real quickly, even if you don't have a play, I'm curious to get your thoughts. This Dallas Wings team, it's pretty bad. I think the Sky and the Sun are the 2 worst teams in the league. Wings are 4.5-point favorites at the Sun. I mean, at some point, Erika Gumbawale is not going to shoot like 30% from the field. Paige Beckers is getting better. The game's slowing down a little bit. Obviously, there's always going to be an adjustment period for a rookie. And they either play Tierra McCowan or they don't. But at some point, clearly one of these 2 teams is going to get a win tonight. But at some point, the Wings are going to look better than what they have looked. Is this the game where they break out and actually you should lay the points?
It could be. And I think that the Wings have more talent, certainly, than the Sun. Like the Sun, you have Marina Mabry, you have an aging Tina Charles, or really an aged Tina Charles, but the Sun are going to be one of the worst teams. They pretty much traded everybody and they tore it down trying to rebuild. The Wings have talent, but I don't think they figured out who they want to play with each other. Like Arike's been bad, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe she might get traded at the deadline.
She should.
To a contender that may want another scorer, chucker, whatever you say, like she's had the ability to score. I think she's on, the back 9 of her career, clearly, for the Dallas Wings. I think Paige has been very solid, even though Kiki Arafin and Sonia Citron for the Mystics, by the way, I think they've been the 2 best rookies, at least very early in the season.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Even though Paige is still the well-deserved favorite, but they haven't figured it out. It takes a while. We saw that with the Fever last year. Like, it takes a while to, play with Caitlin Clark, or when you have a new, person that's dominating the ball from a handling standpoint, which Paige is going to do. So Dejanay, how does Dejanay Carrington fit in here? How does Nalissa Smith fit in here? The one I really like off the bench for the Dallas Wings is Maddie Siegrist, who I think that they ought to play a lot more. I think she could be a mismatch problem. She's a step out, kind of a stretch 4 type of player. They got to play her more, but I don't know if I want to lay it with the Wings, but I don't have a lot of interest in the Connecticut Sun. I think that they probably end up with the worst record in the league. New coach, entire new rotation, just not a lot of talent on that team.
Any assists, props, or anything like that? I saw Becker's 6.5 assists against this Sun defense. That caught my eye. I think she's going to go off. I just don't know if it's points or assists, but 6.5, I feel like she's going to get 8 tonight at least. The Wings are going to really want this game.
Could see that. I'm trying to be a little bit more judicious in the W, to be honest with you, because, baseball's kind of turned around a little bit. NBA's kind of turned around a little bit. W's been a little bit of a slow start for me, as these teams kind of try to figure it out. So don't want to force necessarily there, but I'd probably be on the over before I'd be on the under with Paige buckets.
That's a good sort of tip for, as a veteran handicapper that you are. Things aren't going well, pull back a little bit, lower your unit size, start waiting until you see the ball much better, and the ball looks like a beach ball, right? And see, as a batter, you want to like slump busters. You just got to wait for that sort of breakthrough. And if you're hot in a certain sport, maybe lean into that. But you've been certain spot on in a lot of these props. I wanted to pick your brain in the W on any props. All right, Wes. Great stuff as always, my man. Good luck to you and your Indiana Pacers tonight. Just a reminder, we are a brand new show here on the BetRivers Network. Betting Weekly Fast Break, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And we also launched Betting Weekly Hardball, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. It's all part of the Betting Weekly umbrella, YouTube, and under the BetRivers Network. And plenty of action the rest of the week, plenty of great guests. We'll get into all that. So, Wes, we appreciate it and hope to stay hot on the hardwood. For Wes Reynolds and everyone behind the scenes who does such an awesome job and helps us put on this production, I am Doug Kazarian. We'll see you back here tomorrow.